assassins, yakuza, and a new life. Join me at Midnight Murmurs as we explore the story of Kaito, an elf yakuza assassin, as he seeks redemption and finds a new purpose. Like and subscribe to our channel for more exciting tales. Chapter 1: The Hit. The elf yakuza assassin, known only as Kaito, proceeded along the dimly lighted alleyway towards his target's safe house. He had been recruited to take out a famous politician who had just crossed the yakuza, and Kaito had been picked for the mission owing to his reputation as one of the most competent assassins in the organization. As he proceeded, Kaito scanned the surroundings, searching for any possible hazards or obstructions. He took notice of the different businesses and buildings that flanked the alleyway, each with its own distinctive signs and architecture. The neon lights from the adjacent stores created an eerie glow over the otherwise dark and desolate street. Kaito's thoughts strayed to his past, reliving his boyhood growing up on the streets of Tokyo. He had always been lured to the world of the yakuza, enthralled by their power and influence. As a young lad, he had seen firsthand the brutality and corruption that plagued the criminal underground, but he had also observed the devotion and honor that the yakuza cherished above all else. He had joined the organization at an early age, wanting to show himself and progress through the ranks. Over the years, he had become one of the most trusted and competent assassins in the yakuza, carrying out many assignments with precision and efficiency. As he reached the safe house, Kaito halted to listen for any indications of activity within. He heard nothing except the gentle buzz of electricity from the neighboring power wires. He dug into his pocket and removed a little gadget, a specialist lock-picking tool that he had used many times before. With familiar ease, he put the gadget into the lock and started to operate. After a few minutes, the lock snapped open, and Kaito pulled the door open softly. The inside of the safe house was dark and silent, the only sound coming from the faint hum of a computer that was left on. Kaito made his way through the structure, moving with careful and exact steps. He soon got to a locked door, behind which he knew his prey was waiting. Kaito took a long breath and calmed himself, then kicked the door open with a forceful effort. Inside the room, he noticed the politician seated at a desk, gazing at him with astonishment and terror. Kaito didn't hesitate, grabbing his revolver and firing a single shot that hit the politician in the head. The corpse sagged forward, dead. Kaito didn't stay, knowing that he had to depart immediately before the authorities came. He departed the safe house and made his way back into the alleyway, feeling a sense of relief flood over him that the job was done. As he proceeded, he observed a man standing at the end of the alley, observing him. It was a young lady, clothed in a basic black outfit. Kaito approached her carefully, apprehensive of any possible hazards. The lady spoke first, her voice calm and measured. "You're Kaito, aren't you? The elf yakuza assassin?" Kaito nodded, not attempting to dispute it. "Who are you?" The lady smiled, a modest and enigmatic grin. "Just someone who knows your reputation. I have a position for you, if you're interested. Kaito watched her carefully. What kind of job? It's a simple extraction, the lady said. One of our operatives has been captured by a rival gang, and we need someone to get them out. Kaito examined her proposition for a time, evaluating the possible dangers and advantages. I'll do it, he eventually said. The lady gave him a scrap of paper with an address written on it. Meet us here tomorrow night, K. Kaito pocketed the scrap of paper and nodded at the lady before going away. He knew that he had just accepted to take on another perilous task, but he couldn't resist the attraction of the challenge. He felt a feeling of thrill and eagerness rising inside him as he made his way back to his flat. The following day, Kaito spent most of the day planning for the extraction. He grabbed his weapons and equipment, double-checked his information, and analyzed the layout of the facility where the agent was being kept. As darkness fell, he made his way to the meeting site. The lady from the night before was waiting for him, along with many other Yakuza members. They promptly briefed Kaito on the assignment, giving him with further information and resources. Kaito nodded in agreement and moved out towards the target building. He moved fast and effectively, utilizing his knowledge of the surrounding terrain to avoid notice. He ultimately got to the facility, which was a massive warehouse situated on the outskirts of the city. He cautiously made his way inside, moving stealthily and avoiding any possible traps or security measures. He ultimately spotted the operator, who was being detained in a tiny room on the top floor of the warehouse. Kaito swiftly and silently removed the guards and liberated the spy, who was appreciative but visibly frightened by the event. Kaito took the operative out of the building, making their way back to the rendezvous point. As they traveled, Kaito couldn't help but feel a feeling of satisfaction in his job. He had successfully performed the evacuation without raising any alarms or leaving any indication of his presence. He had once again demonstrated his value as one of the top assassins in the Yakuza. When they arrived at the meeting site, the lady from the previous night was waiting for them. She commended Kaito on a job well done and offered him a huge quantity of money as payment. Kaito received the money without hesitation, but he couldn't help but feel a feeling of emptiness within. He understood that his job as an assassin was risky and ethically problematic, but he had always found a sense of purpose and joy in it. Now, he was beginning to doubt if it was all worth it. As he walked away from the meeting place, Kaito's mind strayed to his past once more. He remembered the individuals he had slain, the families he had wrecked, and the lives he had damaged. He pondered whether he could ever find a way to redeem himself for the atrocities he had done. But for now, Kaito realized that he had another mission to fulfill. He strolled into the darkness, his thoughts concentrated on the work ahead and the problems that lied ahead. He understood that he was a murderer, but he was also a survivor, and that was all that counted in his line of business. Chapter 2: Family Matters. Kaito's footsteps resonated in the deserted corridor of the Yakuza headquarters. He had been called by his boss, and the weight of the air made him apprehensive. As he entered the room, he saw the faces of his co-workers, all members of the Yakuza, gazing at him with chilly eyes. "Kaito, you know why we've called you here," stated the boss, without any prelude. "There's been a rift in the family, and we need you to fix it." Kaito knew well then to ask any questions. He had been with the Yakuza for years, and he understood that it was not his place to challenge his boss's instructions. "What do you need me to do?" he inquired, keeping his voice calm. "There's a tiny element inside the Yakuza that's generating issues. They're beginning to assume they're above the law, and that they can do anything they want. We need you to make an example out of them." Kaito nodded, recognizing the seriousness of the issue. The Yakuza were notorious for their brutality, and Kaito had been taught to be the finest of the best. But he couldn't get off the sensation of emptiness that had been nagging him since his previous mission. He wondered whether it was because of the money he had received, or if it was something more. As he exited the room, he bumped into his buddy and fellow Yakuza member, Akio. "Hey, man, what's up?" Akio questioned, observing the disturbed expression on Kaito's face. "Just another job," Kaito responded, attempting to keep his voice steady. Akio offered him a compassionate glance. "I know how you feel. Sometimes I wonder whether this is all worth it." Kaito nodded, appreciative for the understanding. He and Akio had been buddies since they were youngsters, and they had both joined the Yakuza together. They had seen and done things that most people couldn't ever conceive, and sometimes it weighed heavy on them. Kaito's next step was to obtain more information on the group generating issues inside the Yakuza. He proceeded to one of the local pubs, known to be a meeting site for members of the Yakuza, and began chatting to the regulars. He was hunting for any information that may assist him carry out his goal. As he sat at the bar, sipping on his drink, he overheard a discussion between two Yakuza members. "Have you heard about the new boss in town?" one of them added, in a low voice. "What new boss?" the other one said. "The one who's been making movements in the south. He's been attempting to push in on our turf." Kaito's ears pricked up at the announcement of a new participant in the game. He wondered whether this had anything to do with the group generating turmoil inside the Yakuza. He continued to listen in on the talk, attempting to gain as much information as possible. Later that night, Kaito sat alone in his apartment, mulling through the facts he had acquired. He pondered how he was going to cope with the new boss in town, and whether it was even worth getting involved. But then he thought of his commitment to the Yakuza. He had been trained to think that the family was everything, and that it was his job to preserve it at all costs. As he sat there, lost in contemplation, he realized that he had a choice to make. He could either remain faithful to the Yakuza and carry out his job to remove the troublemakers, or he might choose to walk away from it all. The concept of stepping away from the Yakuza had never occurred to Kaito before. It was all he had ever known. But the sensation of emptiness that had been nagging him since his previous assignment made him rethink whether this was truly the life he desired. As he sat there, lost in contemplation, his phone rang. It was his sister, AI. "Hey, sis," Kaito responded, trying to seem happy. "Kaito, I need your help," AI murmured, her voice trembling. "What's wrong?" Kaito asked, suddenly on high alert. "It's Dad. He's unwell, and the doctors don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know what to do." Kaito felt a twinge of remorse. He hadn't gone home to see his family in months. He had been so wrapped up in his job with the Yakuza that he had forgotten about his family. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Kaito responded, already packed his luggage. As he journeyed back to his homeland, memories flooding back to him. He recalled his youth, and how his father had always been there for him and his sister. He recalled the sacrifices his parents had made to provide them a better life. When he got at the hospital, he discovered his sister waiting outside his father's room. She glanced up when she spotted him, and went over to embrace him. "I'm so glad you're here," she murmured, tears flowing down her cheeks. Kaito held her back, feeling a sensation of shame sweep over him. He had been so concentrated on his business with the Yakuza that he had ignored his family. "How's Dad?" Kaito asked, attempting to keep his voice calm. "They still don't know what's wrong with him. They're performing further tests," AI responded, her voice quivering. Kaito sat beside his sister, hoping for any word concerning his father's health. As he sat there, he realized that this was the first time in a long time that he had had a feeling of serenity. He wasn't thinking about his job with the Yakuza or the faction generating problems. He was just there, with his family. Days went into weeks, and Kaito sat by his father's side, watching as his health deteriorated. He felt powerless, not knowing what he could do to assist. But then, one night, something changed. Kaito was sitting in his father's hospital room, clutching his hand, when he felt a peculiar sensation rushing through him. It was as if he was tapping into a power that he never realized he possessed. Suddenly, he heard a voice in his brain. It was his father's voice, encouraging him to be strong, and to always do what was right. Kaito didn't sure what to make of it. Was he losing his mind? But then he recalled the tales his grandpa had told him when he was a youngster. Stories concerning ancient magic that only a handful could access into. Kaito recognized that this was his moment to improve his life. He may choose to walk away from the Yakuza and embrace this newfound authority. As he sat there, clutching his father's hand, Kaito made a choice. He would leave the Yakuza behind, and utilize his skills to serve humanity. He didn't know what the future contained, but he knew that he had made the correct choice. For the first time in a long time, he felt a feeling of purpose. The following day, Kaito left the hospital, having a weight lifted off his shoulders. He knew that his choice would not be an easy one, but he was ready for whatever was ahead. Chapter 3: The Informant. Kaito sat in a dimly lit room, his keen eyes studying the face of the informant seated opposite from him. The guy appeared uneasy, his eyes darting about the room, as if expecting someone to break in at any minute. "Listen carefully," Kaito murmured, his voice low and threatening. "I need the knowledge you have, and I need it immediately. If you keep anything back, I'll make sure you regret it." The informant swallowed hard, his hands quivering slightly. "I promise, I'll tell you all I know. Just don't damage me." Kaito slumped back in his chair, his face inscrutable. He had done this many times before, and he knew how to obtain what he wanted. He was a master of the technique of intimidation, and he utilized it to great success. "Good," he murmured, his voice still icy and distant. "Now, tell me about the cargo. Who's behind it, and where is it going?" The informant paused for a time, then started to talk in a quiet tone. Kaito listened closely, his thoughts whirling as he assimilated the information. This was just what he needed to take down one of his competitors and earn favor with the Yakuza leaders. As the informant talked, Kaito's thoughts drifted to his own life. He had been reared in the Yakuza, groomed to be a murderer from an early age. But as he got older, he started to doubt the morality of his activities. He had seen the harm that the Yakuza had done to the city, and he didn't want to be a part of it longer. But quitting the Yakuza was easier said than done. The group had a means of keeping its members in line, utilizing fear and intimidation to maintain their devotion. Kaito understood that if he left, he would be placing himself and his family in risk. As the informant finished speaking, Kaito thanked him and rose from his chair. "You've been very helpful," he continued, his voice still chilly. "But if you ever betray us, you'll regret it." The informant nodded hesitantly and ran out of the room. Kaito watched him depart, then turned and exited the building. As he walked out into the brilliant sunshine, he felt a feeling of relief sweep over him. He had what he needed, and he could utilize it to climb forward in the Yakuza. But at the same time, he felt a sensation of emptiness within. He realized that he was doing things that he didn't believe in, and he didn't know how much longer he could continue. As he went through the congested streets of the city, he attempted to put those thoughts to the back of his mind. Later that night, Kaito came home to his little flat. As he went inside, he was astonished to discover his sister waiting for him. "Kaito, we need to talk," she continued, her voice serious. Kaito felt a stab of remorse as he gazed at her. He had always attempted to hide his family from his employment in the Yakuza, but he knew that they were never fully safe. "What is it?" he inquired, his voice hushed. "Father is getting worse," his sister whispered, her eyes full with fear. "He wants to see you." Kaito felt a sensation of fear flood over him. His father had always been a rough guy, but he had also been a proud member of the Yakuza. Kaito understood that he would never comprehend his son's doubts and anxieties. Reluctantly, Kaito followed his sister to his father's chamber. As he went inside, he was startled by how fragile his father appeared. The elderly guy was laying in bed, his breathing weak and laborious. "Kaito," his father rasped, his voice feeble. "I'm glad you're here." Kaito approached the bed, his heart heavy. He realized that his father didn't have much time left, and he didn't want to miss this chance to make things right. "I'm here, father," he replied, his voice firm. "What do you want me to do?" His father's eyes latched onto his, and for a second, Kaito believed he saw a glimmer of understanding. "I want you to do what's right," his father murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to protect your family and your people, no matter the cost." Kaito felt a flash of wrath flare up in him. He wanted to tell his father everything, to explain why he couldn't continue down this road. But he realized that it was meaningless. "I will, father," he responded, his voice full with confidence. His father nodded, a smile of happiness on his face. Kaito sat with him for a little longer, chatting about past times and reminiscing about their shared experiences. As he left the room, he realized that he had made a promise to his father, one that he planned to honor. Back at his apartment, Kaito sat alone in the dark, his mind churning. He realized that he couldn't continue down this road forever, but he didn't know how to get out. The Yakuza had a method of keeping its members in line, and he knew that if he quit, he would be placing himself and his family in risk. But at the same time, he understood that he couldn't keep living this way. He wanted to find a way out, a method to defend his family and his people without resorting to violence and intimidation. As he sat there in the dark, Kaito made a choice. He would utilize the knowledge he had obtained to earn favor with the Yakuza leaders, but he would also start working behind the scenes to undermine their influence. He would utilize his expertise to aid the people of the city, to make a meaningful difference in their lives. It wouldn't be simple, and it wouldn't be fast, but Kaito knew that it was the right thing to do. He would be a Yakuza assassin no longer. Chapter 4: The Heist. Kaito was in a dark, filthy alleyway in the center of the city, waiting for his contact. He was part of a band of other criminals, everyone with their own distinct set of abilities, who were planned to carry off a daring robbery. Kaito was there to supply the muscle, but he understood that his duty was much more than that. He studied his surroundings, taking in the sights and sounds of the busy metropolis. He was accustomed to the noise and bustle, having grown up on the streets, but this was different. There was a sense of urgency in the air, a sensation that something important was about to happen. His contact eventually came, a short, wiry guy with a nervous twitch. Kaito didn't trust him, but he knew that he needed to play nice if the theft was going to be successful. They exchanged pleasantries, but Kaito could feel that the guy was concealing something. They made their way to a derelict building on the outskirts of the city, where the remainder of the squad was waiting. There was the hacker, a lanky guy with a shock of green hair, who was already furiously at work on his laptop. There was the driver, a gruff-looking lady with a cigarette hanging from her lips, who was fiddling with the engine of their getaway automobile. And there was the brains behind the enterprise, a fascinating guy with a slick grin and a silver tongue. Kaito didn't trust any of them, but he knew that he needed to work with them if he was going to be paid. He tried to keep his guard up, but he found himself becoming sucked into their chats, interested by their various viewpoints on life and the world around them. As the hours went by, the crew placed the final touches on their strategy. They had investigated the place, plotted out the security systems, and prepared their escape routes. Kaito was pleased by their attention to detail, but he knew that he was the one who would have to perform the dirty job. The night of the theft approached, and Kaito felt a feeling of exhilaration and fear in equal measure. He donned his black hoodie, checked his weapons, and followed the rest of the crew as they made their way to the objective. The theft was going according to plan, but suddenly things began to go awry. The security personnel were more trained than they had anticipated, and the alarms went off sooner than predicted. Kaito found himself battling for his life, his training kicking in as he brought down one guard after another. The squad managed to acquire the objective and make their getaway, but Kaito was left with a sensation of emptiness. He had fulfilled the task, but at what cost? He realized that he couldn't keep living this way, constantly on the brink, always ready to murder. He needed to find a way out, to escape the cycle of violence and find a new purpose in life. As they drove away from the site of the incident, Kaito stared out at the city and pondered what his future held. He understood that he couldn't go back to the Yakuza, that life was behind him now. But what lay ahead? Only time would tell. The rest of the squad was celebrating their successful theft, but Kaito couldn't force himself to join in. He sat in the back seat of the vehicle, lost in contemplation, attempting to make sense of his feelings. The driver, feeling his unhappiness, turned to him and remarked, "Hey, you okay, back there?" Kaito didn't respond at first, but then he groaned and replied, "I don't know. It's just, this isn't what I anticipated my life would be. I always believed that becoming an assassin would give me a feeling of purpose, but it simply seems hollow." The driver nodded, knowing. "I know what you mean. But you have to remember, we're not in this line of business for the feeling of purpose. We're in it for the money." Kaito couldn't disagree with that, but he still felt that there had to be more to life than this. He chose to quit the crew after they handed off the stolen items, and he went back to his flat to contemplate. As he went through the city streets, he noticed the poverty and misery around him. He understood that he had been part of the issue, that his activities had led to the city's decline. But now he wanted to be part of the solution. He decided to volunteer at a local soup kitchen, helping to feed the destitute and needy. He also started to teach self-defense lessons, utilizing his talents to assist others defend themselves from the violence that surrounded them. At first, he was unconvinced that he could make a difference, but as he worked with the people of the city, he came to understand that there was hope. He observed how his activities were having a concrete difference, how he was enabling people to feel safer and more confident. Slowly but gradually, Kaito started to discover a new sense of purpose in his life. He still fought with the memories of his past, the things he had done and the people he had wounded, but he knew that he was on a different road today. He was resolved to make a difference, to be a force for good in the world. As the days grew into weeks and the weeks evolved into months, Kaito found himself feeling more and more pleased. He had found a new family in the individuals he worked with, and he knew that he was having a significant influence in their lives. He still had a long way to go, and he knew that there would be problems ahead, but he was ready for them. He was no longer the hollow, heartless assassin he had previously been. He was Kaito, a guy on a quest to make the world a better place. Chapter 5: Betrayal. Kaito has been with the Yakuza for as long as he could remember. He had grown up in the group and had always been devoted to them. However, things were beginning to change. Kaito was starting to doubt his devotion to the Yakuza and was pondering leaving the organization behind. One day, Kaito was summoned to a meeting with his employer, the chief of the Yakuza. He was informed that a high-ranking member of the organization had been embezzling money and needed to be terminated. Kaito was charged with carrying out the hit. Kaito didn't like the notion of murdering someone inside his own group, but he had no option. He accepted the position and began about organizing his assault. As he was ready for the hit, Kaito heard a discussion between two Yakuza members. They were considering a strategy to topple the present leader of the organization and seize power for themselves. Kaito was astonished and appalled by their treachery. Kaito understood that his commitment to the Yakuza was misguided. He had been serving an organization that didn't care about him or the individuals he was attempting to safeguard. He had been mindlessly obeying commands without understanding the ramifications of his conduct. Kaito decided to take things into his own hands. He went to the embezzler and offered him a bargain. If he handed himself in and repaid the stolen monies, Kaito would spare his life. The embezzler agreed to the agreement, and Kaito helped him give himself in. Kaito then went to the leader of the Yakuza and told him of the treachery he had overheard. He notified the chief of the Yakuza that he was done with the group and would no longer be their puppet. The chief of the Yakuza was enraged with Kaito and ordered his men to assassinate him. Kaito managed to fend off his assailants and escape, but he knew he could never go back to the Yakuza. Kaito has finally realized his genuine destiny in life. He would no longer be a pawn in the Yakuza's game of power and control. He would utilize his abilities to aid the inhabitants of the city and make a real impact in their lives. He was no longer an elf Yakuza assassin, but a guardian of the innocent. Kaito spent the following 3 days keeping low, attempting to escape any Yakuza vengeance. He realized that he had created a formidable opponent and that he needed to be cautious. During this period, Kaito thought on his life and the decisions he had made. He recognized that he had been leading a superficial life, focused primarily on money and power. He had lost sight of what was actually essential in life. Kaito realized that he needed to make a change. He resolved to utilize his abilities as an assassin to defend the citizens of the city. He began working with local charities and groups, offering security and safety for individuals in need. At first, Kaito struggled to acclimate to his new existence. He was accustomed to working alone and had problems trusting people. But as he came to know the individuals he was assisting, he started to open up. Kaito learned to recognize the good in others, and he began to realize the necessity of community. He recognized that he was not alone in his battle, and that together, they could make a meaningful difference in the world. Over time, Kaito became a respected member of the community. He was renowned as the guardian of the innocent, and people would turn to him for aid and counsel. Kaito has finally discovered his genuine destiny in life. He was no longer an assassin, but a guardian of the innocent. He had discovered meaning and purpose, and he was determined to make the most of it. As Kaito looked back on his life, he understood that his road had not been an easy one. He had encountered numerous hurdles and had made many blunders along the road. But he had learnt from his errors, and he had become stronger because of them. Kaito understood that there were still many problems ahead, but he was ready to tackle them. He had discovered a new sense of purpose, and he was determined to make a difference in the world. Chapter 6: The Rivalry. Kaito had been a member of the Yakuza for as long as he could remember. He had been schooled in the art of assassination and was dreaded throughout the criminal underground. But despite his accomplishments, he had always had a feeling of emptiness within. As he went through the streets of the city, he noted the poverty and sorrow surrounding him. He observed youngsters begging for food and families living in filth. He understood that he had to do something to make a difference in their lives. One day, he got a message from a rival gang boss. The message was simple: "Meet me at midnight, alone." Kaito understood that the meeting would be perilous, but he couldn't resist the challenge. He arrived at the assigned spot and found himself face to face with the opposing gang boss. The two guys gazed at one another for a minute, measuring each other over. Kaito could see the anger in the other man's eyes, and he knew that this would not end well. "Kaito," the opposing gang leader remarked, his voice chilly and intimidating. "We've been monitoring you. You believe you're so tough, so indestructible. But we know your vulnerability." Kaito remained cool, his gaze fixated on the other man's face. He realized that he had to be cautious not to give anything away. "We know that you have a soft spot for the people of this city," the rival gang leader said. "We know that you've been supporting them, providing them food and shelter. But that stops tonight. We're going to steal everything from you, Kaito. We're going to ruin everything you care about. Kaito felt a flash of wrath flare up within him. He had always attempted to keep his actions with the inhabitants of the city a secret, but it appeared that his opponent had uncovered everything. You think you can beat me? Kaito remarked, his voice chilly and controlled. You think you can steal everything from me? I am Kaito, the elf Yakuza assassin. I am the most dreaded guy in the criminal underground. The opposing gang boss grinned. We'll see about that. Kaito realized that he had to be cautious. He couldn't afford to let his emotions get the better of him. He had to keep focused and stay in control. The two guys pulled their weapons, and the combat started. Kaito moved fast, his reflexes honed by years of training. He evaded the other man's assaults and fought back with lightning-fast punches and kicks. The battle was harsh and furious, and Kaito could feel the anguish beginning to build up in his body. But he refused to give in. He understood that he had to win, no matter the cost. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Kaito emerged triumphant. The opposing gang boss was on the ground, his body shattered and battered. Kaito loomed over him, his gaze frigid and unfeeling. This is what happens when you mess with me, he added, his voice low and ominous. You should have known better. As he walked away from the site of the battle, Kaito felt that he had created a tremendous opponent. But he didn't care. He had proved himself to be the strongest, the most feared, the most invincible. And he knew that he would stop at nothing to defend the inhabitants of the city that he had grown to love. Chapter 7: The Interrogation. Kaito went inside the dimly lit chamber, his senses on full alert. He had been charged with questioning a rival gang member who was captured attempting to steal from the Yakuza. The guy was slumped down in a chair, his head lowered and wrists bound behind his back. Kaito grabbed a seat opposite him and leaned in close. What's your name? The guy glanced up, his eyes bloodshot and filled with panic. I can't tell you that. Kaito lifted an eyebrow. You're going to have to do better than that. The guy swallowed hard, his eyes flitting frantically around the room. Please, I can't. They'll murder me. Kaito sat back in his chair, observing the man's face. He could see the terror carved firmly into his face, and he realized that he had to walk cautiously. If he pressed too much, the guy would clam up totally. Look, I'm not here to hurt you, Kaito continued, his tone softening somewhat. But I need to know what you were doing in our land. Who sent you? The guy paused for a bit before ultimately speaking. It was the boss. He asked me to spy out your defenses. See if there was a vulnerability we could exploit. Kaito felt a flash of rage. He had suspected that the rival gang was up to something, but to see it proven like way was still a shock. Who else is involved in this? Kaito questioned, his voice tense. The guy shook his head. I don't know. I swear. The manager merely handed me the task and instructed me to report back. Kaito drew in closer, his gaze narrowing. You expect me to believe that? The guy flinched, but didn't back down. It's the truth. I swear it. Kaito reclined back in his chair, his thoughts whirling. He had to find out more about what was going on. He knew that the rival gang wouldn't stop until they had taken over the Yakuza's area, and he was determined to stop them. Okay, he responded eventually. I trust you, for now. But you need to keep working for us. Feed us information on what they're planning. If you do that, maybe we can work something out. The guy nodded excitedly, relief pouring across his face. Sure, of course. Anything. Just don't kill me. Kaito rose up, his attention riveted on the guy. I won't. But if you betray us again, I won't be so forgiving. He turned and went out of the room, his mind already working on his next move. He understood that the knowledge he had just obtained may be vital, but he also knew that he couldn't let his guard down for a second. The opposing gang was growing more bold by the day, and it was only a matter of time until everything came to a head. Chapter 8: The Extraction. Kaito took a deep breath as he studied the highly guarded structure. It was an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, but it was now a stronghold, crawling with guards armed with assault guns. He realized that his quest was not going to be simple. He looked at his team. They were all seasoned assassins, but he had just lately joined this group, and he wasn't sure whether he could trust them yet. He had learned the hard way that in this line of business, trust could be lethal. Okay, listen up, he said, addressing his crew. Our objective is a high-profile prisoner, kept captive on the 4th level of this building. We have to go in, eliminate the guards, and get out with the captive. Any questions? There were no inquiries, just a mute nod from his crew. They all recognized the dangers and the implications of failure. Kaito took a deep breath and led the way, his crew following closely after. They approached the building from the rear, avoiding the main entrance, which was well guarded. Kaito had examined the building's layout thoroughly and had prepared a strategy that he believed would work. They went over a fence and entered the building via a shattered window on the ground level. The interior was dark and musty, and they could hear the sound of soldiers patrolling above them. Kaito beckoned for his crew to follow him softly as they crept up the stairs. They found a guard on the 2nd level, but Kaito knocked him out discreetly with a single hit to the skull. They reached the 3rd level without any additional issues, but the 4th floor was a different story. There were 2 guards placed outside the entrance, and Kaito understood that they would have to take them out before they could rescue the captive. Kaito indicated for his squad to divide up, with 2 of them approaching from the left and 2 from the right. Kaito himself remained back, viewing the event from a safe distance. The 2 assassins on the left took down their target with a silenced gun, but the second guard heard the disturbance and raised the alarm. "Go, go, go!" Kaito yelled as his crew raced inside the room where the captive was being kept. The captive was a lady, chained and gagged, with terror in her eyes. Kaito approached her and unfastened her immediately. "Let's move, people!" Kaito yelled as they ran back down the stairs. They faced additional guards on the way down, but Kaito's crew was swift and efficient. They took down the guards easily, without any fatalities. As they came from the building, Kaito discovered that the area was encircled by police. He realized that they had to move swiftly if they wished to escape. "Get in the van, we're going out the back!" Kaito yelled as they hurried towards the waiting vehicle. They rushed in the van and sped away as quickly as they could, with the cops hard on their track. Kaito sighed a sigh of relief as they left the cops behind. He stared at the captive, who was still quivering with fright. "It's okay, you're safe now," Kaito murmured quietly. "We're taking you to a safe house, where you'll be protected." The lady nodded, still too terrified to speak. Kaito turned to his crew. "Good work, everyone. We got the job done." His squad nodded in agreement, but Kaito understood that the true struggle was yet ahead. They had to deliver the prisoner to their client, and it would not be simple. As they drove towards the safe house, Kaito couldn't help but think about the dangers they had made to rescue the prisoner. He understood that his actions would have repercussions, and he was prepared to face them. He looked at the lady in the rear seat, who was still quivering with fright. He wondered what type of life she had had before being taken hostage. He understood that in this line of business, there were no innocent bystanders. They arrived at the safe house, which was a plain structure in a calm residential area. Kaito brought the lady inside, where she was welcomed by his team's medic, who examined her over for injuries. "Are you okay?" Kaito asked her softly. The lady nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "Thank you," she muttered. Kaito nodded, happy that the lady was safe. He understood that his task was far from finished, though. He had to bring the lady to their customer and collect his cash. He looked at his squad, who were all staring at him eagerly. They understood what had to be done next. Kaito took up the phone and called the number of their customer. He chatted briefly with the customer, verifying that the lady was secure and asked for directions on where to transport her. After hanging up, Kaito went to his crew. "We have to deliver the woman to a location downtown," he stated. "It's a high-risk area, so we have to be careful." His staff nodded in agreement, and they rapidly started arrangements for the delivery. They placed the lady into a vehicle, along with 2 of the team members, who would follow her to the drop-off spot. Kaito stood behind, monitoring the operation from a safe distance. He watched as the vehicle drove away, vanishing into the bustling city streets. He realized that the delivery would be the most risky portion of the endeavor. He had to believe that his crew was up to the job. Several hours later, Kaito got a call from his teammates. They had successfully delivered the lady to the customer, and the money had been paid. Kaito heaved a sigh of relief. The task was finished, and he could finally rest. But he realized that this was only one task in a long string of risky jobs. He had to be attentive, constantly ready for the next assignment. As he made his way back to his safe home, Kaito reflected about the dangers and benefits of his work. He realized that it was not a life for everyone, but it was the only one he had ever known. He wondered what the future held for him, but for now, he was satisfied to take it one task at a time. Chapter 9: The Underworld. Kaito took a deep breath as he got out of the sleek black automobile and into the dimly illuminated alleyway. He adjusted the collar of his leather jacket, felt the weight of the pistols strapped to his chest, and made his way towards the door of the dingy nightclub. He had been assigned with obtaining intelligence on a new danger to the Yakuza, and that required digging deep into the criminal underground. Kaito had been in this game for a long time, but even he felt a tinge of worry as he pulled open the heavy door and walked inside. The air was heavy with the aroma of smoke and perspiration, and the music was so loud that it vibrated through Kaito's bones. He searched the packed room, seeking for his contact, a nasty little guy called Toshi who knew everything there was to know about the criminal underground. Kaito eventually found Toshi in a dark part of the room, crouched over a table with a bunch of shady-looking people. Kaito approached him, nodding at the others and slipping onto the seat next to Toshi. "Kaito-san, good to see you," Toshi welcomed him with a toothy smile. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" Kaito came right to the point. "I need information. There's a new player in town, and they're making moves against the Yakuza. I want to know who they are and what they desire." Toshi sat back in his chair, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "I've heard a couple things, but nothing definite. You know how it is, Kaito-san. People don't want to speak about the new people." Kaito groaned, irritation growing inside him. "I need something, Toshi. Anything." Toshi peered around the room, as if looking for eavesdroppers, before moving in closer to Kaito. "There's a man. Goes by the moniker of the Spider. He's been making waves recently, and not in a good way. I understand he's got a lot of dirt on the Yakuza. Maybe he's the one you're searching for." Kaito frowned. "Where can I find him?" Toshi shrugged. "I don't know, Kaito-san. He's a ghost. But I know a buddy who may be able to assist you. His name is Hiro. He owns a tiny pawn store on the fringe of town." Kaito nodded, sensing a ray of optimism. "Thank you, Toshi. I'll go visit him. Toshi held out a hand. Wait, Kaito-san. There's something more you should know. The spider is harmful. He's not someone to mess with. Be cautious. Kaito thanked Toshi again and made his way out of the nightclub, his mind already racing with the possibilities. He understood that the next step was to hunt down Hiro and see what he could provide, but for now, he felt a feeling of pleasure in having made progress. As he strolled back towards the automobile, Kaito couldn't help but ponder about the world he lived. It was dark and hazardous, but it was also exciting. He realized that the dangers were enormous, but the benefits were much higher. And he wouldn't have it any other way. Chapter 10: The Final Showdown. Kaito has been following his ultimate nemesis, a rival assassin known only as the Raven, for months. Their hostility had reached a boiling point, and Kaito thought that the only way to reconcile it was by a final, dramatic battle. As he approached the abandoned warehouse where the Raven was hiding, Kaito couldn't help but reflect about his destiny as an elf Yakuza assassin. He had grown up on the streets, alone and helpless, until he was taken in by the Yakuza and educated in the art of murdering. But as he ascended through the ranks, Kaito came to wonder the morality of his activities and the cost of the violence he inflicted on others. As he entered the warehouse, Kaito sensed the Raven's presence before he saw him. The air was thick with tension as the two assassins faced one another, each waiting for the other to make the opening move. "You've come a long way to die, Kaito," the Raven remarked with a sneer. "I could say the same to you," Kaito said coolly. The two assassins circled one another, sizing one another up. Kaito realized that the Raven was skilled, but he had prepared for this moment his entire life. He had to trust on his training and intuition. Without warning, the Raven lunged at Kaito, his blade flashing in the weak light. Kaito dived and struck, his own sword humming as it slammed into the Raven's. The two assassins fought with intensity, their maneuvers elegant and devastating. Kaito evaded blow after attack, his mind and body moving in perfect unison. He could feel the thrill flooding through his veins, but he kept focused and determined. As the conflict dragged on, Kaito began to obtain the upper hand. He could see the misery in the Raven's eyes as he fought to keep up. Kaito thought that success was within his grasp. In a final, devastating assault, Kaito struck a deadly blow on the Raven. The second assassin dropped to the ground, defeated. Kaito gazed over his fallen competitor, his breath coming in fast spurts. He felt a sensation of relief, but also a profound sadness. He recognized that this win had come at a terrible cost, and that the violence he had just delivered would haunt him for the rest of his life. As he departed the warehouse, Kaito couldn't help but linger on the choices he had taken and the course he had walked. He recognized that he could never change the things he had done, but he could choose to live differently from this point on. He went away from the world of the Yakuza and the life of an assassin, determined to discover a new road forward. Chapter 12: A New Life. Kaito had been living on his own for a few weeks now, and he was still trying to acclimate to life outside of the Yakuza. His days were filled with a sensation of emptiness that he couldn't shake off. He felt like he had lost a part of himself when he quit the group, but he knew deep down that it was the correct option. As he walked through the bustling streets of Tokyo, Kaito couldn't help but feel like a stranger in his own city. The familiar sights and sounds he had grown up with now felt foreign and unfamiliar. He missed the sense of belonging that came with being part of the Yakuza, but he also knew that he could never go back to that life. Kaito had made a promise to himself to start over and build a better life for himself, but he didn't know where to start. He needed a new purpose, a new direction, and most importantly, he needed to find. One day, while he was going through the city streets, he noticed a ruckus emanating from a nearby alley. He raced over to check what was going on, and he noticed a gang of thugs abusing a young lady. Without hesitation, Kaito jumped into action. He fought off the intruders and saved the woman's life. As he walked the shaken woman back to her home, Kaito felt a sense of satisfaction that he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized that he had found his new purpose, to protect and help those who couldn't defend themselves. Kaito decided to start his own private security company, specializing in protecting women and children from abusive partners and dangerous situations. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to make a difference in the world and leave his violent past behind him. After the event, Kaito escorted the lady home to assure her safety. Along the way, they struck up a discussion, and Kaito found that her name was Mei. She was a student at the local university, and she had a love for painting. Kaito found himself captivated by her energy and her warmth, and he realized that he had not felt this way in a long time. He knew that he had to see her again, and he asked for her phone number before they parted ways. Over the next few weeks, Kaito and Mei went on a few dates and got to know each other better. Mei was fascinated by Kaito's determination to make a positive impact on the world, and she admired his bravery and selflessness. Kaito, on the other hand, was grateful for Mei's unwavering support and her ability to make him feel like he was capable of anything. Together, they formed a strong bond that would help them face any challenge that. Over the following several days, Kaito and Mei spent time together, and he found himself enjoying her company more and more. He opened up to her about his history and his troubles with quitting the Yakuza. Mei listened to him intently, and she provided him with encouragement and understanding. As they spent more time together, Kaito started to view life from a new perspective. He learned that there was more to the world than simply bloodshed and power battles. He noticed the beauty in Mei's paintings, in the people he encountered, and in the environment around him. He understood that he wanted to be a part of this new world, but he also realized that he had to make peace with his past. Kaito went to meet his old employer, hoping to make apologies and find closure. He approached the Yakuza headquarters with reluctance, knowing that he was no longer a member of the group. His old boss received him with animosity, accusing him of betraying the Yakuza. But Kaito kept his ground, stating that he had to go in order to discover his own path and to make apologies for his previous acts. After a long conversation, Kaito's old boss finally relented and allowed him to leave without any further trouble. Kaito walked away from the Yakuza headquarters with a sense of relief and a newfound determination to live a better life. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to put in the work to make amends and start fresh. With a clear mind and a heart full of hope, Kaito set out to explore the world and find his place in it. After considerable debate and bargaining, Kaito's previous boss consented to let him leave the Yakuza without any penalties. Kaito felt a feeling of relief rush over him, knowing that he had finally ended this chapter of his life. He knew that it was time to move on and start anew. As he walked away from the Yakuza headquarters, Kaito couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. He had spent years living a life of crime and violence, but now he was free to explore the world and discover who he truly was. Kaito had always been a skilled fighter, but he also had a passion for art and music. He had always suppressed these interests in order to fit in with the Yakuza, but now he could pursue them without fear of retribution. Kaito was determined. As Kaito departed the Yakuza headquarters, he felt a new sense of purpose. He realized that he had a long voyage ahead of him, but he was determined to establish a new life for himself. He glanced back at May, who was waiting for him outside, and he realized that he had discovered a new purpose for living. He would use his skills to help others, to protect the innocent, and to make a positive impact on the world. Kaito knew that it would not be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. He had seen the darkness that consumed the Yakuza, and he wanted to be a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in that world. As he walked towards May, he felt a sense of gratitude for her unwavering support. She had been with him through thick and thin, and he knew that he could not have made it this far without her. Together, Kaito and May started a new chapter in their lives, exploring the world and finding new things. Kaito still carried the weight of his past with him, but he also knew that he was capable of building a fresh future for himself. As he strolled hand in hand with May, Kaito felt a feeling of serenity and optimism flood over him, knowing that he was on the correct road to atonement and redemption. They traveled to different countries, immersing themselves in different cultures and experiencing new adventures. Kaito found solace in the beauty of nature, while May loved to explore the bustling cities. They both found joy in trying new foods and meeting new people. Along the way, Kaito also found opportunities to help others who were struggling with their own demons, just as he had once done. May was always by his side, providing support and encouragement whenever he needed it. Together, they were unstoppable, and Kaito knew that he had finally found the peace and happiness that had eluded him for so long. Though his past still haunted him, Kaito had learned to forgive himself and to focus on the present and the future. As they watched the sun set over a beautiful beach, Kaito knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be, with May by his side. ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He smiled, feeling a sense of contentment that he had never known before. The weight of his past no longer burdened him, instead, it had become a source of strength and resilience, propelling him forward towards a bright and hopeful future. Thank you for joining us at Midnight Murmurs for the story of Kaito, the elf Yakuza assassin, on his journey to find a new path and make amends for his past. We hope you enjoyed this tale and found it as captivating as we did. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories and adventures. Until next time, keep exploring and discovering new worlds with us at Midnight Murmurs.